Hello, how you doing? It's Phil Thatch, and I have a very special lens to share with you today. It's the Viltrox 75mm f1.2. This is an APS-C lens, so it'll be 112.5 millimeters full frame equivalent, and it's f1.2, so it should have a really creamy background. I traveled north a couple of hours to the University of Tennessee to visit my daughter with this lens, because this lens is basically a portrait lens. That's really what it's probably designed for. And so I drove up there to visit my daughter. She's just back in school, and made some portraits of my daughter and her fiance for a little while today with this lens. But let's take a look at it. Viltrox has a new design for their rear cap for Z, and it fits good, but it's a little bit loose. There appears to be a weather sealing type gasket. All the Viltrox lenses that I've tested have had an aperture ring, which is nice, but this is the first one that's clickable, and it goes from 1.2 with lots of nice clicks, I think on every third of a stop, all the way to f16, and then it has one more stop where it has an A, and when it's on A you can control the aperture from the camera like you would a lens that didn't have an aperture ring. And that's the way I do mine. It'd be fine with me if this lens didn't have an aperture ring at all. But it is nice that this ring is clicked, and it has a switch. So you can just flip that switch and you've got a clickless aperture. So that's pretty cool. All the other Viltrox lenses that I've tested have all been clickless. They haven't had the option to add the click. So that's really cool. There's also on this side a Pro logo. This is, I believe, the first Viltrox lens in the Pro line, which is really cool. And it has a autofocus manual focus switch and a focus lock switch that has a nice tactile feel. It's all metal. Well, I don't know, maybe the aperture ring might be plastic, but it's mostly metal. Even I think this focus ring is maybe metal. Plastic lens hood. I love that this is a 77mm filter thread, because that's the size of my Maven filters. So a lot of times, this is a f1.2 lens. Nobody buys an f1.2 lens to shoot at f8. So I was shooting outside today in pretty bright light. And sometimes, because the Z50, which is an APS-C Nikon camera, which is what this particular lens is designed for, this thing's fastest shutter speed is 1/4000th. So sometimes, in order to stay wide open at f1.2, because that's what I wanted to test, nobody wants to see me shooting this thing at 2.8. What's it look like at 1.2? That's what we're spending a little bit of extra money for. So I put my Maven 3-stop neutral density filter on there, and that allowed me to get my shutter speed back down to something that the Z50 can actually handle. Only when it was bright. Like if a cloud would come over, I could take this off and shoot at 1/4000th. But if it got to be really sunny, I'd put this on and shoot at 1/1600th or 1/1250th, and it would work just fine. A couple of times, because my daughter and I were going in and out of some of the buildings at the campus, a couple of times I would forget to slow my shutter speed down, and with auto ISO that put my ISO pretty high, but that's my fault. That's not the lens's fault. But the lens has a really nice feel to it, and let me read some specifications for you from the spec sheet. 75mm f1.2, it has 16 elements in 11 groups, 3 ED lenses, 4 lenses with high refractive index. And one of the great things about this lens is, even wide open at f1.2, which is when you would think this thing would have chromatic aberration all over the place, I couldn't see any chromatic aberration at all. And I've tested the other Viltrox lenses. I tested the 33, which was really a pretty good lens, but it had a lot of chromatic aberration. The 23 was a little better, and the 56 and the 13mm, all those are 1.4s, and I've tested them all. The 13 and the 56 were even better, but this thing is the best of them. This thing is awesome. I mean, if it didn't say Viltrox on the side of it, I would think I was shooting, other than the metal construction, I would think I was shooting with a Nikon lens, because it has perfect optical performance as best I could tell. Viltrox says the lens is dust proof and moisture proof. I definitely saw a weather or dust seal here at the bottom. And I actually did shoot with it in some light rain today and had no problems at all. You know, I don't know if I would want to take this lens or any lens out in a heavy downpour. They do claim that it's dust and moisture proof. So that is another reason why it's part of their Pro line. So that's the good news about this lens. The bad news is there's really only two things about this lens that I don't like, unless you count the kind of loose rear cap, and then that might be through. But in terms of performance, the only two things I don't like is, first, the minimum focus distance is 0.88 of a meter. It's a long, long way. You can't get really close to your subject. But that's not really a big deal because this is a portrait lens, and with it being 112.5 millimeters full frame equivalent, 75 millimeters APS-C, you don't really want to get really close to your subject. This is a lens that has you backing up. So this is not a lens for confined spaces. This is a good lens when you have a lot of room and you want to be back away from your subject and still have great separation that this wide aperture at f1.2 will give you. The other thing that gives me pause about this lens is the focus speed, not the focus performance. Even on the Nikon Z50, which is not the greatest autofocusing camera in the world, it focuses good. When it locks on, you've got sharp images even at 1.2, which that used to be back when we had DSLRs. Getting an f1.2 lens to lock on someone's eye, you know, even without eye detect autofocus, if you moved your focus point and put it on the eye, getting that eye good and sharp with a 1.2 lens was really difficult. But this lens, when the focus point is on the eye's sharp. So that is great about the autofocus. What's not so great about the autofocus is it doesn't focus very fast at all. So I don't think this will ever be a sports lens. Now I do plan on maybe later this year going out to some Chattanooga softball, and I should be able to frame up a batter with this focal length from the front row in the stands, and it might be great for that. But I don't think it's a good, strong athlete running at you as fast as they can go sort of a lens. Now I did take some pictures with this, and I'll show them to you a little bit later. I did take some pictures of my daughter and her fiance walking towards me, and I made a burst, I don't think in the fastest frame rate, but fairly fast, and I made a burst of them coming at me, and we'll see how it performed in that situation, but that's not a sports situation. But otherwise, I think this lens did really well. So let's take a look at some examples that I made today during my trip to Knoxville. Okay, so here are 22 photographs that I made with the Z50 and the Viltrox 75 1.2, and I was in the middle speed, not the low speed continuous, not the high speed plus, but high speed, which I think is about 5, maybe 6 frames per second on the Z50. And my daughter and her fiance were walking towards me. And let's take a look at these 22 shots. And oh, also, I'm at 1/1250th and ISO 1000. So during these, I had a 3-stop neutral density filter on the camera as well, but it was starting to get cloudy, and I could have taken that filter off and run the shutter speed up and had probably a lower ISO. But anyway, here they come. They're walking towards me. My daughter's blinking on the first shot, but in focus, in focus. We are in focus as we make our way through the pictures, and then my daughter starts being funny, and then as I'm moving along, then Ian starts being funny. They are made for each other, aren't they? What a cute couple. And there they are. There's all 22 of them. And every single one, I believe the focus, I had eye detect on, and I believe it was on my daughter's eyes, so those are the eyes to be looking at. But every one appears to be sharp. Let's take a look. Yeah, there's a lot of noise in there, and it's still loading. But yeah, her eyes are nice and sharp, walking towards us at f1.2 with a 3-stop neutral density filter on. Maybe this is a sports lens, I don't know. I'll try it with sports sometime later this year. But it does appear to focus slow when you're just switching from one thing to another thing, but it did fine with this. I don't see a single miss during these 22 photos. Okay, here are 14 photos that I've actually edited, and of course all these are at f1.2 as well. And I got to the university before they were out of class, so I just kind of wandered around and made a couple of shots. This is a bridge that goes over the main strip of the campus, and I made a photograph. My focus point was here. I wasn't focusing on this man, and you can tell because he's a little out of focus. My focus point was on the bridge, but this is an interesting thing right up here. See all this, these specular highlights coming through here, and there's bokeh, but what I don't see is chromatic aberration, not a bit. It's pretty impressive that this lens wide open has virtually no chromatic aberration. So this shot was, this was with the 3-stop on there. It's 1/1250th at ISO 280 because it was, you can see it's pretty bright and sunny here, so I had to put the neutral density filter on. And let's see what our next shot is. This is another one with the neutral density filter on. This is one of the smoky statues that they have around the campus. And I was just goofing around, but somehow I ended up liking this picture, so I shared it with you. Next picture, now I've picked them up and I've taken them to a hamburger restaurant. I always, you know, college students are always hungry, so I always feed them when I come and visit. And on this one, my daughter's eyes are a little bit further back than Ian's eyes. And as you can see, my daughter's eyes are good and sharp, but Ian's eyes are soft. But his ear is on about the same plane as my daughter's eyes, so his ears are sharp. But so if you're making a photograph wide open with this lens of two people, you need to make sure their eyes are on the same plane, or they may be a little blurry looking. Let's see what that one was. This one I had taken the neutral density filter off. We're at 1/200th and ISO 320 inside. So, and it was pretty dark inside this restaurant, so that's pretty nice to be able to shoot at 1/200th and keep your ISO low. That's another great thing about f1.2. This is outside the restaurant. Now I'm at 1/4000th because I don't have the neutral density filter on. As fast as that shutter will go, and I'm at ISO 100. And fortunately, there was a little bit of a cloud, and my daughter's eyes are nice and sharp. And look at the creamy subject separation. They used to call the Nikon 85 1.4 the cream machine, but this lens is every bit as creamy as that lens. So that's pretty impressive. I was standing on a one-way street, but the street in the background is a two-way street, so I could stand on that one-way street without worrying about a car coming and take pictures of them as they walked across the crosswalk. And I thought the separation was really nice, and it had started to rain. You can see some raindrops, but I'm still, even with it raining a little bit, I'm at 1/4000th and ISO 100. And then I got a picture of them walking back across the street, and you can see more rain up here. There's rain everywhere, but you can really see it where the background's dark. But I liked the bokeh and the separation of this Abbey Road ripoff. And now Ian has gone back to class. He had another class to go to, so I drove him over and dropped him off. And Casey and I walked around the campus, and we're in a Vol store, which has all sorts of Tennessee merchandise. And I made a selfie with us in the mirror. And even reflecting in the mirror, it's still pretty close to sharp on her eye. I wouldn't think it would be perfect reflecting in a mirror, but it's pretty darn close. So that was kind of cool. This is another shot. That's the main strip there in the background as we were just about to cross the street to go back onto the campus. Look at the Bokeh-fied McDonald's logo back here. You can barely tell it's a McDonald's logo. And now we're inside the saloon. This is a hotel and restaurant that's owned by Peyton Manning, and they've got a signed Peyton Manning helmet on this table. Casey's eye is nice and sharp. The trouble with this image is we were indoors, and I'd had the neutral density filter off, but I forgot to slow my shutter speed down. So I'm at 1/4000th f1.2 and 3600 ISO. I could have slowed this down and got it to 100, and it would have been a lot clearer. I did run this image through Topaz. It was a lot more noisy before that. Here's a shot of Casey in front of one of the older buildings in the university, and I thought this one looked nice in black and white. This is not a great display of the bokeh and the separation, because the wall right behind her is right behind her, and I was way back when I made this shot. But this is probably my second favorite portrait of my daughter the whole day. Another 1/4000th shot without the neutral density filter on there. These little robots, you can order food there on the campus and they will bring it to you, which is pretty amazing. And I was just focusing on this one and letting this one be juxtaposition behind it and bokeified. Here's Casey on the bridge that goes over Philip Fulmer Drive, and that is the beautiful Neyland Stadium bokeified behind her. And there she is on the bridge. The Cream Machine version 2. Isn't that something? Look at the bokeh out of this lens. Now this is in the same area we walked back to the car where we had parked it near Peyton Manning's saloon. And this is that same building that I took the black and white picture in. And I made this shot and I like it a little bit, but my favorite shot of the entire day is this one. I thought this one turned out really cool. 1/4000th ISO 360 75mm f1.2. And this is what this lens can do. It can give you great subject separation even when you're taking a photograph of somebody full body. You know, any lens you can take a real up close of just your subject's head, but a lens like this, you can get a nice separation between your subject and the background, even if you're doing a full body shot. And I really like the framing of this one as well. I hope you like it. But that's the last of my edited shots today that I was able to capture with the Viltrox 75 1.2. So this morning before I went to Knoxville, I got my hair cut. It looked terrible yesterday, but yesterday I did go out on the back porch and make a quick video clip of myself with this. So let's see how it looks with video. I know the focusing motor is a stepping motor and it's quiet. I haven't heard it at all during video, and I haven't heard it while I was working on stills either. It's virtually silent. All right, I'm out here braving the August Tennessee heat to test out the Viltrox 75mm f1.2. I'm shooting this wide open at 1.2 in order to use the proper shutter speed of 1/50th of a second on a 25 or 24 frames per second timeline. I had to put a 6-stop neutral density on, but that's the price you pay to get bokeh in the background like this. I think it looks pretty great, and let me know what you think in the comments below. This is straight out of a camera video from the Nikon Z50 and the Viltrox 75 1.2 at 1.2. Well, that's going to do it for my quick review of the Viltrox 75mm f1.2 lens. I've really enjoyed using it today on the Z50, and man, I'm looking forward to Nikon coming out with a pro-level APS-C camera that would be a match for this lens. It's going to be a great combination when they do that, but in the meantime, you can still make some wonderful photographs with this lens on the Z50. And I've seen even some people, I haven't tried this, but I've seen some people on the internet have put this on Z7s, and maybe I might even let my buddy Ray borrow this and see what he can do with it on his Z9. You know, of course they would have to go into crop mode, but there's still plenty of resolution on both of those cameras. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure we'll be seeing this lens at some point in the future on the channel. Bye-bye.